Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da da 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 ba da da.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, here before you, some might say, is the Wild West incarnate. A man, yes, but a man too wild to live. A man, ladies and gentlemen, who declared war on society itself. Of his dark deeds I shall remind you, if and you have the belly for it. In our Creator Corner, Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips return with a saddlebag full of spoilers into the Enfield Gang Massacre from Image Comics.
Yeah, Lisa, your intros are just getting longer and longer
I
and
know.
more referential.
I cannot wait until I just copy down an entire first issue and I read it from beginning to end in our Creator Corner.
I think that would be fun to do, like comic book theater.
Yeah, we've talked about it before.
Yeah, but the copyright is like, we don't own these books.
But I'm still, what's not copyrighted yet is my idea, which I'm going to say right now as to copy it.
Okay.
Copyright it? I don't know how copyright
Yeah,
works.
that's how it works.
So my idea is, there are all of these podcasts that are specifically for falling asleep.
Oh, yeah. We have talked about this, yes.
So I would love to do like a Patreon feed that was just like us describing comic book panels as we get quieter and quieter until eventually you guys drift off into slumber, sleeping with Brad and Lisa. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
On this page of Transformers by Daniel Warren Johnson and Mike Spicer, Optimus Prime has ripped Skywarp's arm straight from... I messed it up.
You've already messed it up.
I messed it up because Optimus rips out his own arm. He rips his own arm off, and then he beats Skywarp with his own arm.
What the hardest part of that podcast would be us not suddenly shouting. Because that is both of our affectations when we get excited. All of a sudden, we're screaming.
I'm pretty darn excited. We've had another really full weekend. Last show we talked about our Awesome Con panel in Washington, D.C. And now we're going to talk about Lisa's big day. It was her students' recital on Saturday, and it went off like gangbusters.
Aw, thank you, Brad.
I'm pretty sure I came to this conclusion last year during your recital, but it was absolutely cemented this past Saturday. I do feel like a children's piano recital or a children's recital of any kind, because you have some voice students as well. It's like the purest form of artistic expression, of artistic celebration, because you have, songs by Taylor Swift being performed by children, but also, Beethoven, and you have like Handel's Messiah, and you have, Justin Bieber. They're all smashed together, and it's just gorgeous. Like everyone attempting perfection, but absolutely not reaching it. But again, going back to our Dave Baker conversation from several weeks ago, the beauty is in the attempt.
I see my piano and voice studio as like a low-key countercultural movement because I was brought up as a performer. I was a kid who, when she made mistakes, would be so upset and so ashamed. And I just never wanted that for my students. One of the things I'm most proud of is that when my students get up and they whiff, they laugh. And it makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
Like, after the recital, everybody is eating cookies and smiling and complimenting each other and encouraging their kids. And I just have one parent whom I love her kids, but she said about her daughter who really reached with her piece. She picked a piece that was just at the edge of her capability. She really went for it, but she did make a mistake. And this mom said, oh, well, she's got the choking gene. I'm a choker and my kid's a choker. And it just gets under my skin because, one, I think all of my students made a mistake with the exception of two. And it was two kids who are really great practicers and did not go to the edge of their capability. They
didn't step outside their comfort zone.
They picked pretty safe pieces.
Yeah.
And so I've been practicing in the back of my mind how I can plant the seed in that student's mind. That's not the lesson you should learn from performing. The lesson that you should learn from performing is you get up, you give a piece of yourself, right? You're expressing yourself. And if you make a mistake, that's totally okay because there's going to be 1,000 opportunities to get up again if that's what you really want to do.
Yeah, and the great thing about a recital is everyone around you is making mistakes also.
Yeah.
And
people are mostly hyper-focused on their own people, you know?
I feel that, okay, it's astonishing to watch something perfect. You know, when you go to a concert and you see somebody just nail a piece, like there is awe there. And, I don't want to dismiss that awe, but I feel like personally the humanity is in the imperfections.
Right.
And that's where I feel the most connected to the piece is when you hear like, ooh, almost got it. When we first started doing these recitals, and I would go to them, I would put myself in the bodies of your students.
Yeah, you'd
and
empathize.
cringe with them when they would hit a wrong note, and you like a shiver would go through my body. But now I look forward so much to going to these things. I no longer cringe at them because I realize failure is the path to success, and you're never ever going to be Beethoven.
Yeah. Well, you
like,
cringe because you think that the child is going to be
hurt
unhappy
or something. Yeah.
And you see the kids just so ebullient and buoyant and just so happy that they got it over and done with.
That's part of it also. So you stress so much going into these recitals.
I do. I care a lot.
And you stressed so much going into our Awesome Con panel. Like the last 2 weeks, it's been a lot of anticipation.
Yeah.
And that slow anticipation can be stressful and exhausting.
I would love to make one more point if that's okay.
Of course. This is your podcast, which is not perfect.
This is like one of my soapboxes I get on with, my students and their parents is I will never go to a talent show. And the reason is this. I'm not interested in seeing someone's raw, undeveloped talent.
Yeah, this is the talent you were born with.
Yeah, because I feel like with talent shows, you get a lot of kids who have never taken a dance lesson in their life, and here they are doing their little choreography, or someone is like, okay, I've seen some movies, here is my karate act.
Here's my rawness.
And I go I am never going to go to a school's talent show. I would love to go to a school's skills show, And I think a lot of times you see someone sit down at the piano and play an amazing piece or sing a piece and it sounds so beautiful and you go man, I wish I could be that talented.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, behind that, just being able to sit down casually and play a piece on the piano is hours of practice
right.
and steady and getting up and completely blowing it. And another beautiful thing about this recital is this is the first time one of my adult students agreed to be in the recital.
Yeah, which was great. I loved it.
And I have been on an uphill battle with this particular student on what does it mean to make a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would beat himself up of, it wasn't perfect. And he sees his performances as either a 0 or a 1.
Right.
But in between failure and success, there are all of these parallel universes where different things happen. And, playing at home for yourself or for your wife or for your teacher is a completely separate skill than getting up and doing it in front of strangers.
Yeah.
And it makes me question of like, he's been to my performances and he's heard me mess up. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, what do you think of me?
Yeah.
When I get up and I mess up some lyrics or I lose my place or I'm not having the most beautiful tone ever that I've ever had, like, what do you think then? Like, what do mistakes mean? I've had students have reckless performances, and it happened at this recital. At their lesson before, I'm like, do you really want to do it? Are you ready to get up? And they're like, yeah, no, I want to do it. I'm like, okay.
Let's go.
Seems reckless to me, but you could theoretically put in a ton of work between now and then.
That's how the dance at our wedding came together.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
should we practice this thing? And I was like, I refuse.
Never. So like, there is recklessness.
Yeah.
But most of the time, a student who messes up has played it perfectly 100 times.
Yeah. So takeaways from these recital experiences for me are, the humanity is in the imperfection.
Yeah.
The beauty is in the attempt, and you want to see the effort.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can, and everybody can recognize the effort. They can recognize the effort in the 98% of perfect measures you play.
But you're not here for Lisa's recital talk.
Yeah, that was bonus. We included that for free. You're
that
welcome.
was bonus banter for our Enfield Gang Massacre conversation with Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips. And this is a conversation that goes full spoilers into the complete run of the Enfield Gang Massacre. You need to have read issues 1 through 6 to truly appreciate this conversation. If you're looking for a conversation that's just a tease to the Enfield Gang Massacre, Lisa and I have already had it, and you can find a link in the show notes to that. We spoke to Chris and Jacob just after the first issue dropped, and that will get you hyped for the rest of the series. But this one is about dissecting what they accomplished within these 6 issues, all of which are currently available from Image Comics, but the trade paperback will hit shops on April 9th, and the trade paperback has a bonus story in the back.
Ooh.
Just like Tyler Crook's The Lonesome Hunter's The Wolf Child. And as we said in that episode, I'm loving this trend of adding a few more pages to entice us to pick up the paperback. And I do feel like the short story at the end of the Enfield Gang Massacre implies much more than what we got.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of possibility in that short story, which we do talk about with Chris and Jacob in this conversation.
What Chris and Jacob do so well is create pockets of curiosity. As you're reading the story, you will get these little like dings of like, oh, what is that about? I would love to dig into that. There's so much mystery to go around that, like, as they reveal more about the county of Ambrose, they are planting more seeds. So, like, It's exciting to learn more and know that you will never know it all.
The Enfield Gang Massacre has such a deceptively simple premise, and I'll just read it to you straight off of their website, the Image Comics website. Montgomery Enfield and his gang of outlaws find themselves in the crosshairs of an aging Texas Ranger and a newborn county that's hungry for law by any means necessary. That's it. That's really all you need to know going into it. But if you have read these 6 issues, like, this is the kitchen sink Western comic. Chris and Jacob have an opportunity to tell their Western, and they throw every trope, every type of character from a Western movie or a Western novel that they have read into this comic, and somehow it's not a muddled mess. It's a celebration of all the Westerns that they love, but it is still purely a Chris and Jacob experience, and like you said, it is additive to this mythology that they have been building with that Texas blood.
I feel like you can read the Enfield Gang Massacre having not read that Texas blood. They are kind of independent stories, but I love their overall theme of there are individuals who are trying to control the narrative and they think that they have won, but history knows itself. And history will fight back to reveal itself. It's about the potency of the truth.
And the delight of the comic, Lisa, is how all of that grows out of this tremendous dread. The book is called The Enfield Gang Massacre. It opens in 1906 with Enfield's body on display at a carnival. Things are not going to go well for this guy, Enfield. But also, there are two ways that you can read The Enfield Gang Massacre as a title. Either they're going to get massacred or they're going to do the massacring. So there is still mystery present within that dread. And the other element of the book is the back matter that Chris Condon writes from the point of view of the journalist who is trying to understand the history of what happened. But within that history are a bunch of lies and misconceptions. But the art itself is the truth.
Is it though? Because we've had this conversation twice now with Tom King and now with Chris and Jacob that like I'm supposed to just believe the pictures over the words, like words lie, but pictures tell the truth. But I also know that our memories are the most unreliable narrators of all. Like,
Right.
you know, you just have to watch true crime documentaries to know, like, the way that you see things as you're looking backward is only tangentially related to what actually happened.
Well, even if the images themselves, if Jacob Phillips's art is the truth, the way that you're interpreting them creates a fiction.
Yeah,
right?
that is also true.
And we
That's
talk
also
about
true.
that with Chris and Jacob in this conversation. I don't want to spoil that too much.
But it seems to be from those two conversations, I'm going to draw a conclusion, which is irresponsible. But like, pictures telling the truth, is that the rule of comics? Like, am I supposed to just believe pictures?
I think it depends on the reader. And I think if it's Lisa Gullickson reading, Lisa does not believe
I believe
the
nothing.
images.
I believe nothing.
Before we get to this conversation, though, Lisa, with Chris and Jacob, we have to do some
Referrals.
Sponsored by Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. Just like your local comic book store, you pay per book, but digital.
Their focus is on building an excellent customer shopping and reading experience and using novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book. They feature top-tier content and already have many of the top publishers in comics today.
In the spirit of helping people find their next new favorite book, we have our referrals segment. The idea is to give our counselees, that's you guys, further reading on the themes of the episode. Think of it as us sending you to specialists to further your healing journey through comic books.
Ooh.
And Lisa, we've got a Western here. We haven't covered too many Westerns on the podcast, so this really gives us an opportunity to delve into Omnibus, to certain corners of Omnibus that we don't normally explore through our referrals segment, because I want to talk about a Western, and I'm assuming you want to talk about a Western?
Yeah, I do. I had one pop to mind immediately.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then I think you should go first.
So I picked a comic that is not in its totality a Western, though I think maybe it could be seen as a Western. In one volume in particular, it goes Western hard. I think using it as a cultural touchstone that is the Texas that lives in our imagination.
Is it Preacher? Are you finally recommending Preacher, Lisa?
No, I am recommending Saga, Volume 8 from Image Comics.
The Abortion Town arc.
Exactly.
Okay.
This volume has this iconic cover from Fiona Staples with Alana with that big 10-gallon hat sitting atop a rainbow zebra. And like for me, the reason we go to the Western is to have a few certain ingredients.
Yeah, it's a shorthand.
So one of the ingredients is the idea of a perilous journey. You have to get somewhere, but you know it's going to be dangerous. The second ingredient is a lack of lawfulness. That idea of on the frontier, people are creating the rules on the fly, and a lot of the time, those rules are going to end to a deadly conclusion. A lot of Saga is a journey. Marco and Alana and Hazel are bouncing from place to place, just trying to stay out of sight during wartime. But I think with this storyline, the reason it had to be a Western is because in the situation that they are in, Marco and Alana really have to challenge what they believe, what they want, and what they are willing to do or compromise to get what they want or need. So if you haven't read Saga yet, they are the couple that we have covered the most.
Yeah.
In my heart, I still don't think we're done.
No.
But all of Saga is available on Omnibus as volumes, and you can just start reading it now. Do yourself the favor.
Yeah. Great recommendation, Lisa. For my referral, I am going to pick a comic that is much more in time with the Western. It is a straight Western, although the creators are playing with the tropes in the same way that Jacob Phillips and Chris Condon are. Although, well, maybe not exactly the same way, because it is a story coming to you from Alejandro Jodorowsky and Francois Bouc, and they have their own proclivities and vices, and, you know, their comics are not for everyone, and often are not necessarily for me. But I do like this one a lot, which is Bouncer from Humanoids Press. It is about a saloon bouncer and a one-armed gunfighter and the various encounters he has with despicable people throughout the West. Sometimes he's on a quest. Sometimes a quest comes to him. These are big stories, but Francois Bouc, his illustration style is, you know, much more, or it's much less surreal than the stories that Jodorowsky is pursuing. So there is a clash in style between the two, and I like that clash a lot. Bouncer is violent, it's uncomfortable, but it is very much a Western from a European lens, you know. So think of the spaghetti Westerns of Sergio Leone. Well, actually, like, Leone's not the greatest comparison. Think of the Westerns of Sergio Carbucci, you know, The Great Silence and Django, where there's a lot more grit and, what's another word for uncomfortableness? They will take you up to the edge of queasiness.
Okay,
you know?
sure.
And that's my warning. But I like them.
You do.
Like Saga, Bouncer is available on Omnibus. The first volume is relatively cheap. It's like $5.95, I believe. And you know, you don't need the app. You just need a browser. So hit up the link in the show notes and get to browsing and shopping today. And you can also start making a wish list. I think Lisa and I are going to put together a Comic Book Couples Counseling referrals wish list.
Yeah, we should.
To keep track of all the referrals that we've done.
Because we are terrified of doing the same one twice, and we might have already done it.
I think
we are not
have.
sure.
I think we have. But neither of us have recommended Saga or Bouncer before. I can guarantee that.
Unless we have. Referrals.
Now let's go ahead and bring our guests into the love nest. This is your last warning. We are going full spoilers with the Enfield Gang Massacre. All 6 issues are currently available from Image Comics, and the trade paperback is going to hit stores on April 9th. Chris and Jacob, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
We are crazy excited to dig into the Enfield Gang Massacre and go full spoilers with this trade paperback now that we have it, including a new 6-page story at the very end. And I think that's where we wanted to start with a prequel story, which suggests that maybe there's many prequel stories to the Enfield Gang Massacre.
Well, if sales are great, we will do it. Because we did this with that Texas Blood, where we dropped little hints of things that have happened previously and all that. And, you know, we did the same thing with the Enfield Gang Massacre and the back matter. So it kind of was a no-brainer that, you know, we see the end of the Enfield Gang. But they have a history before that. So it's fun to actually explore that. a little bit.
The Enfield Gang Massacre, and we talked about this a little bit when we had you both on to discuss the first issue. It's such a dread-filled story. It's called the Enfield Gang Massacre. We know where it's going. It begins with Enfield's body petrified and on display. So his end seems predetermined in some fashion. But then to take us all the way through the massacre's story and then give us a glimmer of what it was like before that horror. Like it leaves the reader of the trade paperback not in a puddle of tears. And
that was also the point of it, was to just, give somebody, because you have this really, there was a way that Spielberg talked about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Munich when it came out, which was that he called I don't know if exactly how he referred to it, but he referred to it as like the sweet dessert to the bitter herbs that he used in Munich. And I feel similarly about how we've done this, where it's like this sort of dread-filled, as you said, story in the Enfield Gang Massacre that really, it's sad. At the end of the day, it's sad, it's melancholy. And then once you get to that 6-page story, it's just all fun and games, essentially. So it's sort of this like almost like, oh, this is not so, this is fun.
It's like a reward
they had a
for
life.
Making it to the end.
Exactly.
Jake, how much time had passed between the completion of the last issue and the illustration of the short story?
Not much. Like I was right up against the deadline on the last issue. Maybe like a month in between, something like that. Yeah, not as much time as would have been nice because I was right up against it on pretty much every issue of this series, because I started at issue 1 thinking I had like 2 weeks more than I did, and then realized that I had to get it drawn like straight away. So after that, that sort of set me up for the entire run of just being behind all the time. So it was like, it was pretty. There wasn't a massive gap in between for me.
And what was it like for you to then go from like the 6th issue to that short story where, again, the 6th issue is just this beautiful, sad conclusion, and then here we are with like a train robbery, having a little
totally
fun.
very different. Even in the art, it's different.
Yeah, I think it was just fun to do. Like again, after doing like 6 months of solid work on this thing, and it's like, oh, now I just got to spend like a week doing this fun little side story. It's nice to be like, oh, this is like a nice time to spend with these characters that we've sort of grown to love through the series and have watched get picked off one by one. So it's nice to spend some like quality fun time with the gang.
The darkness in Ambrose or the intentions of Ambrose the place have kind of just always been there. Is the timeline revealing itself to you as you're writing it?
In a way, yeah. I mean, I have an idea of everything, but I don't have it, fleshed. Like I don't have, a conspiracy theorist, the papers up on the wall with the timeline. I have like an idea of that there was this thing that happened, and I kind of have an idea of when like people would have come to establish Ambrose County and all, and I mentioned that in the back matter, and that's sort of based on the real places, Marfa and Fort Davis and all those places. So I have an idea of it, and I have an idea of the timeline of what goes on, but I don't have anything set in stone. And I think that that's good because it gives me some leeway in how I do things. And even in the back matter of issue 7, I said some things that I was like, let me say that, and that was part of the reason that we did the back matter that we did the way we did it in Enfield, was to establish that everybody's gotten everything wrong beforehand.
Right? Yeah.
It allow going not having it as clear cut. It allows me some freedom with, if I want to tell a different story, I can sort of figure out the details and later, it's malleable, which is nice. And then just jumping back to the 6-page story, one of the things that we did right from when we sort of conceptualized it was I said to Jake that we were supposed to be a 5-page story first. And I was like, let's do 6. and I'm not doing the 3-panel. Like I'm not doing it. So that also changed how we did the art too. But yeah,
I did try and keep it as much as I could in horizontal panels, even with the extra panels. But there's a few verticals. But even in the first issue, there's a couple of verticals, and I think maybe later on there's a couple. When I asked Chris originally to do the 3-panel pages idea, in my head I was like, oh, it'd be cool because it's all landscape, but I didn't think about the fact that it really reduces the amount of space for Chris to tell a story in it. So I apologize.
Well, it was a challenge. It was a fun challenge. I'm glad we did it. I'm really glad we did it because it really pushed me to try to have to script in a way that I hadn't scripted before.
The next thing will be like 12 panels a page just to get me back.
I feel like with the circumstances of like LQ West, like one of the main themes of the story is like the person who's telling the story really matters. Can we take all of the art in the panels as fact as we're reading?
I wouldn't even trust the back matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying.
I
don't trust
I would
the back
trust
matter.
the comic because that's what actually was happening.
Yeah. Okay. So the
Which
art
was-
is what's actually happening.
Yeah, so that was my opinion on it. That was how I was thinking about it. Although they tend to line up, but I would, there's things that are sort of theorized in the back matter when we know that they took place this way.
Right.
It's sort of like he sort of insinuates that this may have been what happened, or this may have been this person's character or whatever. But then we actually see it in the the sequential pages.
Yeah, it almost creates a third unseen narrative when you combine the two.
Yeah, which is that's why we included it in the trade, because it just we don't typically include the back matter, and the back matter is always sort of it's more than ancillary, this extra stuff that just sort of builds out the world a little bit. Whereas with the back matter in Enfield, it kind of became integral to the story.
Well, do you feel like when you make the decision to do this landscape widescreen Western storytelling, which does also like pick up the pace of the reading, like the trade, especially when you get it all, you could get through it really quickly if you want to.
Yeah.
Did that also make it go like, well, now I need some back matter because, I need to do more. I need more words.
Yeah, that was definitely a part of it. In that I really wanted to, because I didn't have the real estate on the page to tell the story as deeply as I wanted to tell the story. And I sort of found that out because I didn't know that I was going to do this continuing article. I kind of thought I'd do like a page of the article and then I'd do other stuff too. And then in issue 2, I had it was a hard time writing it because I really wanted there was a lot of story to get to. And I felt like, oh man, I'm coming up against the page count. I'm coming up, I'm doing too many panels and, and sort of that sort of stuff. And it kind of took this learning. It was a little bit of a learning curve to figure out that it was okay. I can do all the 3-panel stuff and the splash pages and leave it at that, and then just kind of push the like more of the story into the back matter. And so I think in issues 3 to 6 you'll see that especially, but in the first 2 issues I sort of struggled with the balance of that. I mean, I don't think it reads that way necessarily.
Issue 2 opens up with Amy's nightmare, which is sort of a vision of the future. And then the final issue, of course, we have this occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Enfield gets hanged, and then he sees a vision of the future as well.
What were I don't remember what it was that you sent me, but you sent me.
It was Captain America, like 112 or something. There's these Steranko surrealist pages.
Yeah.
Captain America gets drugged.
Yeah, and they've got the white background, borderless. I think it works well because it sort of becomes that sort of lucid, free-flowing kind of thing, because you can sort of read it however you want. Obviously, you naturally go top, bottom, left, right, but it's not as clear cut. So you're trying to balance it so that it makes it makes sense when you're actually reading it, and creating it, but then also trying to balance it in terms of making it work as one big image as well, which is sort of true of any comic page, but I think it's sort of more so this way because it sort of makes you think of it all at once, and it can also be read all at once. So you're sort of trying to make it as clear as possible through that. But it was fun to like switch it up and do these sort of these free form pages in what is quite a sort of strict rules that we set ourselves in the other pages. So it was fun, and it's also trying to work out how you can make it work in terms of like location, like because you obviously not everything's got a background because everything's on white, but you need some kind of sense of location, so you're trying to like work that in as well, and trying to balance the sort of surreal aspects of it as well. So it's those pages are fun, but they're definitely challenging.
When we read the first issue and we talked about it, Lisa and I really didn't realize like how much of a relationship story it was going to be as well between Amy and Enfield. I mean, this is kind of like a perfect comic book couples counseling comic as well. And the fact that we have the nightmare of Amy's and how it mirrors his vision, like that's how we interpret it.
Now we know we have to take everything that we see as fact. The way I interpreted the dream sequences, the parallel dream sequences, is that could have been if Ambrose wasn't this terrible, messed up place, that would have been the future of Amy and Enfield.
So, and the way that I kind of think of it is that it's almost like a mutual vision that we're seeing of both her and him, because we start off on her eyes and we end on his. So it's sort of mutual. This future's been taken from us. One of the ways that I thought of it when I was writing it was that we would do this. So we would have the close up on her eyes, and then we'd go into this surrealist, dream sequence where we're not exactly sure if it's a dream sequence. We don't really tell you it's a dream sequence until we snap back in reality when his neck snaps. The way that I thought of it was that because we did the dream sequence the way that we did it in issue 2, where we opened it that way, and it was those surrealist pages, was that if you're paying attention, you would know that it's a dream sequence because of the way that it's designed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became that was something that I thought of as well, was just thinking about it in that way. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like I said, I think that it was, an interesting thing to try to think of it almost like this is like that both of them were sort of imagining, or thinking about what was just being taken away from them in that moment. And yeah, it was just doing Owl Creek Bridge was really exciting for me to play with it because it's such a classic American story, and I think most people in America read that in school. It's like a very, it's like you go to English class and your chances are going to read an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. And I've always loved that story. I've always loved the work of Ambrose Bierce, and we had named the county after him. And in crafting the ending, we knew that we had to have Enfield die, So in thinking about it in that way, I was just, well, how do we kill him? We know he's going to die, and we know he's a mummified corpse. But how do we do it? And I sort of thought that, I mean, might have been a little bit of a big swing, but I think that it paid off. The idea of wanting to do it in this way, where it was paying homage to this classic, of literature, who also gave his name to the county, Ambrose County. I sort of thought this is kind of the way that it should be done. Because I was, I thought about just doing, I was gonna have him, oh, maybe he'll try to run and he'll be shot or something, and I was just like, that's not exciting. That doesn't have like the impact that I want it to have. And I felt like this, where we get to, and see the future of what these two people could have had and really make it about them, which became clear to me in writing. I think in terms of, I don't know how other writers do it, but I mean, I always have like an idea of where I want things to go. I don't necessarily have it all planned out, especially when I do Texas Blood or Enfield. I don't really go in with an outline for the whole series. I know where I want things to go. I have an idea of like, oh, I want to have this, like for example, like the the rooftop gambit. Like I knew I wanted to have the rooftop gambit. I knew I wanted to have this scene and this scene, blah 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 blah. So that's kind of how I think of it. I don't really sit down and plan it out in that way. So I didn't really know that Amy was going to even be that big of a part of the story, but I like to, in the first issue, sort of give myself a lot of things to play with because I think that they'll probably will find a way to, to help me tell the story. And moving into issue 2, it just sort of worked that I thought that what would be a really great intro would be this dream sequence where we're sort of establishing this sort of this impending doom, this foreboding thing, and then have her wake up to Enfield covered in blood. And so it just their relationship just at that point sort of became the focal point. And I thought that was an important thing to kind of focus on, and also humanizes Enfield, who could have just been a villain or, just, an outlaw, but giving him an emotional center, I think helped build him out as a character and helped build Amy out as a character so that they weren't just sort of two-dimensional. And yeah, so that kind of played into how we ended up with the ending where we see this, vision of what they could have had.
I find the survival of Amy very intriguing because Ambrose tends to kill people who try to leave. I love the little detail.
She wasn't supposed to live. That was the other thing. I
Yeah.
told Jake I was gonna kill her.
She looked pretty mortally wounded.
I was gonna kill her, and then I liked her too much, and I thought, oh man, I think that that would make it the ultimate ending would be that she gets out. And I just was like, oh no, I think that's how this has to go, and that's kind of how I think of this. I like that I don't plan the stuff out so much because it allows me the freedom to do this where I'll sit down with the page and like figure it out. And I mean, it makes it more difficult at times, but it also allows me the freedom to, because I told Jake, I was like, I think I'm going to go pretty dark here. I think I'm going to have, because when the most of it stayed the same, where we have her have the gun to her head, right? So that was, but she was going to die there. It was gonna be a really brutal moment.
But yeah, I remember you telling me that she was gonna die. Then I get the script for issue 6, and I'm like reading through it, like waiting for it to come, and it never comes. I'm like, what? This is so much nicer than what he promised me.
Well, it was just such a brutal book already.
Yeah.
I felt like it would have just been too much to kill her, and we knew that Enfield was going to die, and it seemed like it just was going to be too much. And I like how we handled it, where we have her sort of point at the audience and at all the people there that did this thing and go like, what did you do? And just like point out the insanity of this whole thing. Yeah.
But then you have this person who survives, who remembers how it actually happened.
Yeah.
Where I feel like so much of Enfield Gang Massacre is about the idea of nobody knows how it happened because everybody died. Only Ambrose knows how it happened. But now there's this the other factor. And then also she has an adult son who perhaps has heard how it's actually happened.
Yeah. And I thought that was, it was sort of implied in the vision that they were going to have a child, and I really liked that idea that even just despite the fact that he's murdered and hanged, he lives on in this son, and then we find out through the back matter that eventually this person in New Jersey is related to Enfield,
right? Right.
So and I liked the idea that like Amy bought his corpse from the sideshow and brought him to Connecticut to be buried with her and her current husband, which I think is just it's sort of a sweet thing, and it just sort of, I don't know, it became what started out as sort of let's just do this like banger of a action western. Became very much, I think, like that Texas Blood story,
Yeah.
Where-
You just can't help yourself.
no, I can't help myself. I like sweet moments. I don't think that, it's not cloying. And I think that it works for the story, and I think that it really helps make the story memorable and emotional. The way that I think of it is like it just kind of it went the way that it had to go. And that's personally why I don't really sit down and outline this stuff, is because I like to figure it out as I'm going. I think that it allows the characters and the actions and the story to really tell itself to me, more than if I'm sitting down with an outline and basically I'm just porting over whatever already written, which tends to be what happens in comics. I mean, especially if you're working, for hire, at a publisher. But Image is such a unique experience as a publisher. You're left free reign. You can do whatever you want. And we're lucky that we have That Texas Blood, we have Enfield, and we have this new project we're working on where we're very much given the same sort of freedom to just tell the stories the way we want to tell them, and we don't need to turn in an outline, and we don't need to do the things that publishers typically want you to do. We're just able to do it the way that we want to do it because we tell the stories the way we tell them.
When I first read the last issue, and we have the occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge sequence, the vision, I was like, that was a slap, as for me as a reader. And I was like, oh, this is the perfect way to end this story. But what I was not anticipating was when we get back to the carnival and Amy is at the carnival, how those last two frames, it's funny I say frames because I do think of it as in cinematic terms. They do feel like one perfect shots, especially those last two, where Amy is looking into Enfield's eyes and the carnival barker says, what do you see? And then we get that final bright, smiling, sunset, sunrise panel of Enfield. And that's when I was just like, oh no, I'm crying. Jake, can you talk about executing those final two frames, but also just really that final frame, the last shot of Enfield?
Yeah, well, it had to sit in because with that the carnival stuff is all in that sort of bluey wash color scheme, which is the same as in the issue one, and it obviously had to contrast that as much as we could do. And I can't remember exactly what it said in the script, but it was like we can see it's Enfield looking back at us, full of life compared to the corpse that she sees before her in reality. But it's trying to sort of evoke that kind of emotional response, and it's sort of like he looks like they've been like walking together for hours or whatever, and it's like they've been talking, and it's maybe the sun's coming up or the sun's going down, and it's perfect, like golden. It's like this like idealized, like dream-like kind of image, which hopefully sort of perfectly captures the way she felt about him. And that was a nice one. I think it's hopefully it packs the emotional punch, because it's it's sort of the opposite of what we've done earlier when it flashes. We've got the nice sort of dream sequence and it cuts to him being hanged from the gallows or whatever they are, and so it's sort of the opposite to that. Hopefully it has a similar sort of emotional punch to it.
Ambrose, the place seems to attract people who are going to maintain a history that keeps people coming to and staying in Ambrose. Like, to me, now we have like this kind of like wild card of Enfield and Amy did actually go out. And to me, like that smiling face of Enfield is like a little bit more hope than I'm accustomed to from the rest of the story.
In a really depressing story.
Yeah, and a really depressing story, yeah.
Well, I all that I know is that when I handed the issue script over to Jake, there was a lot of, I don't know if this works. Let me know if it works, because I didn't. I just was again. I think that we took some big swings in it, and I was afraid that people might think that it was a cop out, that we do this vision of what's going to happen, and then also to like I didn't know if that. I'm glad that the final panel of Enfield works, and I mean I'm working with a fantastic artist like Jake, so a lot of the time I'll just sort of trust him to be able to do it. But with that, I was wondering, is it too cheesy? But I felt like, you know what? I think it works. I think it needs to be there. And let me see what Jake thinks. And Jake felt like it was good. So, okay, that's the seal of approval. And then he nailed it. But yeah, it was sort of, there was a lot of, this whole series, I'm really glad that people are, responding to it and enjoying it, because there were so many things where I was just like, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And it really wound up working in all levels, it seems, with people. Yeah. I'm really happy with, how Jake handled everything. It's amazing. And to the idea of doing the colors that way too, I think was really smart. I don't remember if it was in the script or not, but about doing the sort of the washed out colors and then doing the, full bright colors on that final panel, but it just really works, really sells it.
It sort of goes back to that first issue as well, where we go, obviously we have the same thing, we go dead to live. In that, I wanted to do the same sort of thing where you go from this sort of the washed out blue colors to the vibrant colors present for them at least. So it's like with the colors, I didn't really I can't remember what was in the script, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I was like, I need a way to differentiate between them quite clearly, and it's the same kind of style that I do when I'm coloring my dad's books. There's a lot of flashbacks in those books. I tend to do the same sort of thing where you do this a gradient map over a grayscale color, so you get that sort of hue to everything, that sort of wash tone. So I was like, that just seemed like the obvious thing for me to do, and then it has that sort of Wizard of Oz moment where it sort of flicks into full color, which I quite liked. And then, trying to repeat that again on the back end.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's super effective. Now that we have this 6-page story prequel that ends the trade paperback, the Enfield Gang Massacre really does have everything you want in a Western. You've got now a train robbery, you've got a hanging, you've got a shootout,
You've got a romance.
You've got a romance, you've got, a butchery. It really does feel like you put all your Western dreams into one bound book.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, when do you get the chance to do a Western, right? We were really fortunate that we were already working in this, in Texas, in that Texas blood. So it sort of just lent itself to, well, let's do a Western. I don't think I ever, would have thought of doing a full-on Western without Jake pointing out, can we do that? I don't really even think that I would think to myself, let's do that. Because I mean, I've always loved Westerns, and there's certain stories that I would love to adapt or whatever, but I never thought about doing one myself. And it was really, okay, well, if we're going to do it, how would we do it? And, there's, obviously there's the Butch Cassidy element of it, and I love Butch Cassidy, so I get to work that in there. And then you got to have a train heist, and I was thinking about the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and and then just having it be fun, having it be harsh in places, have a romance, as you said, have a bromance. It's it was fun to just play around and just think there was even references to not even a Western, but another John Ford film, The Quiet Man, in the vision sequence where they go to the house and there's like the broom and the fireplace and all that. That all came from John Wayne follows Maureen O'Hara into this cottage, and she's like, and then the wind is howling, and it's the scene that's also in E.T.
Yeah, with the kiss.
That was It was just, it's such a iconic moment. I was like, let's just make this an iconic John Ford scene, and just say this is what their relationship was. See, it was just fun to dip into all these things that I love and Jake loves, and we just were able to do it. I don't know, it was a dream to sort of do it.
You even got a Gatling gun into this book.
Even got a Gatling gun, which
I'm never drawing one of those again.
I know.
Apparently, so I wrote it in and I wrote that it works, but what I read up on those guns is that they would jam all the time. They were a terrible gun, but in our comic, it works pretty well.
It works great. When you see that though, Jake, do you go like, "Oh, this is great! I get to do my Gatling gun sequence," or is it actually just a tremendous pain in the ass?
Yeah, but I don't think if you really pay attention to what I've drawn, I don't think any of it actually works. Like I really just like botched it all together. It's like the way he's holding it, I don't think really works, and I think it's all just like obviously you sort of suspend belief slightly, but it's like looking at it now, I'm like, I just don't know. I just faked it as much as I could, because surprisingly, it's quite hard to find any reference of people holding Gatling guns like that. Also, it's this huge, there's no way you could just have it on your shoulder.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah. I mean, it's a fun sequence, like that double page spread when it's he's got his back to us and he's shooting up on the hill is just that was a great page to draw. And it's like, yeah, this is so cool, but I'm like, I will never draw this again.
the one page, so the next issue where we open with them seemingly in victory, and then the father, the pastor figure gets his head shot off, and I remember getting the inks in for that with his eyeball flying out. I just feel like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I wrote it in the script, but I was just like, oh my God. What?
I didn't think he'd really do it.
Yeah. It's just, but it's, so we got a little bit of everything in there. I mean, the Gatling gun stuff, there's definitely Gatling gun stuff in like the Outlaw Josie Wales and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and also definitely in Blood Meridian, one of my favorite books. So, it was just sort of one of those things where I was like, somebody's got to have a Gatling gun. Yeah. They gotta,
Yeah, it's a kitchen sink comic.
Yeah.
Yeah. The train I actually really liked doing. Finding all that the reference stuff. It's all that like chunky metal, like all the sort of mechanical stuff. It was really fun to draw. So getting to do that because there's no there had to be a train somewhere, I think. So getting it in those 6 pages is really fun. And drawing like the wheels and stuff like that I thought that was much more fun than I anticipated it doing. Because I don't really like drawing like tech stuff and like
cars.
Cars. Yeah, cars are hard and stuff like that. But like this was like, I think if it's like proper, solid, chunky mechanical stuff, it's quite fun. So that was a lot of fun. So I feel like when you look at the inks, you can tell that I'm enjoying it much. Like it's not just like blacked out with like shadow over everything. It's like I've actually drawn it for once. So maybe I must have had more time on that than I do normally.
That's funny. Well, it is what it is. But I remember an issue like whatever in the first arc when I wrote in the 405 in traffic, and you were like, never again.
I think on that I found a way around even drawing it for one of the panels. I think it's just like the cars, but there's no background or anything.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just not going to draw that.
Well, I know you have more plans for that Texas Blood, and you were talking to AIPT Comics, and you made reference to it going in an area and maybe even a state that we might not be anticipating. But do you also feel like there is a possibility of returning to the West, even though you have done like the kitchen sink version of a Western?
Yeah, I think that it's possible. Because I mean, we've done at this point, we just did a spinoff with Enfield, and we would love to do an Eversol spinoff. So I think that it would make sense that we could potentially return to that. I mean, it's we gave ourselves, so much history to play with, and there's stories that are referenced in the back matter of like Missouri, so it's like we can go to Missouri and we could do, we could have a story in Arkansas, we could have a story in Oklahoma. There's so many stories and things that we could do. I mean, there's also they have a history in Ambrose County. There was reference to like a train heist that went wrong, which you could argue could have been the train heist in the train. But they end up, that's what brings them down to Ambrose County, was that they were trying to find a place to hide out for a bit. And so there's a lot of history to play with. I mean, I'd love to do it more if possible, but I mean, it would have to be we'd have to have a story to tell. I don't want to just sit down and go, let's do a Western and then try to figure it out. Because we really did, at the end of the day, I feel like you said it, it's a kitchen sink Western. I really got everything I wanted in there, and I think Jake as well. He got to draw horses and disemboweled man. So, it's, we'd have to have some, a good story to tell. I don't want to just go out there and just, I don't want to bullshit people, just for the sake of doing it. If it's a good story, I'd want to do it.
Well, I'm curious about what happened even before the West, right? Like like we go back to Enfield, the answers aren't there. They're before that.
Lisa still wants the original sin.
I want the original sin. Adam and Eve was it started in Texas.
There's a forthcoming arc where we'll see a little bit of that, but whether that's whether we'll actually dive into that in the spinoff, I don't know. But we're gonna get into the history of it a little bit more in a further arc.
Oh, exciting!
Because in my mind, we've always kind of thought of it as there's a finite end, and so the way that I think about it is that there's 3 arcs left in that Texas Blood as a series, and I know what they're going to be. So the next one is a heist, and that's that doesn't play so much into the history of it, but the last 2 will really play into the history of the county and be very Joe Bob centric.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something. It's you could go back in time, to when there's just a tribe living on the land, and I think that would be really cool to do. And that's something that I don't think that you would necessarily see in a lot of Texas set things. And I think that that's it'd be really exciting. I mean, because it's one of the books that was recommended to us by Larry Francel, who's a West Texas historian. When we were starting out Enfield, we were visiting.
His book's up there somewhere.
We were in 2022. We went to Texas.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So we went to the fort together, and we drove around with Larry, and he showed us the town. And he told us about this book, Big Wonderful Thing. Is that what it's called? I think it's called, which is a George O'Keeffe quote about Texas. And the book itself, because it's a historical book about Texas, but it starts off with the Spanish conquistadors coming into Texas. So I definitely think there's history there that warrants it. We could probably do it. I think that would also be really cool to do.
There's a new movie out called Out of Darkness. Have either of you seen it yet?
I have not seen it.
So it's set 42,000 years ago, and it's about a tribe, a clan of people crossing a big body of water and ending up in a land that's unfamiliar to them. And as I was watching, I was like, this is kind of a That Texas Blood story. So, just something to think about. Worth seeking out that movie for sure.
Yeah. I that's the way that we've set up the series thus far, is that it's, we do a different genre, a different, different time period with each arc. We have the Christmas stories where we do kind of whatever we want to do. Which is, and those are some of my favorite issues. Just these one and done, just like EC comics essentially, which is wild. I'm actually writing EC comics now. But I was doing them anyway.
Crazy.
Nobody could stop me. I was doing them anyway. But that's the way that we've kind of set up the series anyway, is just that we kind of are able to jump around in time and see, we've done Enfield now. If we ended up doing Eversaw, which is a debate about when we will do Eversaw, which I think we could talk about off the air. But I mean, it's, the stories that we tell, the way that we tell them, it's not like The Walking Dead where you're just following these characters through, a linear timeline. We're jumping around in time and seeing things, different perspectives, different genres. So I think that that's definitely something we could do. And I want to check out that film now because it sounds awesome.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for talking Enfield Gang Massacre. Excited that we finally got the trade paperback, and excited that we finally get to have a full spoilers conversation about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us, Ed.
Thank you for having us
great
on.
to talk about this. It was a fun story to do. So it's really great that people are reacting it to the way that they're reacting to it, and appreciate your kind words.
And there you have it, our conversation with Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips about the Enfield Gang Massacre. And Lisa, I will not be happy until we have our Neanderthal That Texas Blood storyline.
Well, I am a believer in the multiverse. So I believe that comic exists. That comic is out there. And I just hope that I'm on the plane of existence where I get to read it.
Sure. Well, exactly. I just want to read it. I will say that since having this conversation with Chris and Jacob, Chris did reach back out to me and go, what was the title of that caveman horror film you just watched? Out of Darkness. Here's a link to the trailer. Go check it out. It is also, I think, now on video on demand, so all of our listeners can check it out. And also, if you're checking out that movie, you should then check out my interview with director Andrew Cumming on the Comic Book Couples Counseling website.
Plug.
And speaking of plugs, our next episode is another creator conversation, this time with Becky Cloonan and Tula Latte, talking about their distillery series Somna. The first 2 issues are out now, but this Wednesday, the 3rd issue hits, and I believe we're at the halfway point of this really witchy and sexy comic.
I haven't read it yet, but Brad warned me to not read it, just not lay it out at the coffee shop.
Well, yeah, I mean,
because people will be scandalized, probably including myself.
I mean, if you're on the metro and a child scoots up next to you, maybe not spread the center of Somna. That's all I'm saying.
We need to be cognizant of others. That's fair.
And we still owe you, yes, we know, our next Schema counseling session talking about Avengers versus X-Men. But did you not hear about AwesomeCon and Lisa's recital? Also, we screened Hellboy at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia, which came with a Guillermo del Toro virtual introduction. So we've been super busy.
We've been moving and shaking.
And at that screening of Hellboy, we also announced our next screening, which will happen on April 21st at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester. As always, co-sponsored by the Eisner-nominated comic book store, Four Color Fantasies. And that screening will be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. Go Ninja, go Ninja, go. Have you ever seen a turtle get down? Yes, in the sequel to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, which you're going to want to see again on the big screen at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia.
Sometimes the robot version of Brad Gullickson shows up to do our plugs, and all I can do is just get out of the way.
I'm sorry. I'm excited. I'm just excited.
Okay, I think it's time for us to get back on our saddles and ride off into the sunset while the little boy yells for, like, Shane! Shane. And we go, like, we're not Shane. We're the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast.
I wish I was Shane.
And where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can tell me I'm Shane on most social medias at MouthDork. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. If you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art and show poster, send them to Karen Chapp at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you prefer.
We did just learn that people listen to us on YouTube.
Isn't that fun? I did just say prefer weird, and I want people to know that I can articulate. We're everywhere.
That is true.
If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
I should never interrupt you in the middle of this part, and
Yeah,
I apologize. But if you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast. And Lisa, did you hear how I said gmail.com?
It's really humanizing, and I appreciate it.
There you go.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show while you're there?
Yes, please.
We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
I don't think we have a stinger this week.
Yeah, I know. We just really nailed it.
Doopy doopy. Bum bum ba da bum bum ba da ba.